I asked which of my contemplations people would most like to see me do a longer video on YouTube, and the answer I got most frequently was all. So I guess I'll start at the beginning with frog in a pot, or frog in a kettle, however you want to phrase it. And I look back on some of the first videos and the nature of them, and it was literally, as the name says, me contemplating some stuff under a tree. I'd get an idea in my head. I always have ideas in my head. I guess everyone always has ideas in their head. And I'd attempt to really engage the thought and what new information I may have to search to complete the thought, because I may be thinking about something and there may be a gap there in the information that I have, and I'm the curious kind of person that I'd go find it, allow my mind to process this and run it through other things that you learn and get some new knowledge out of it, as it were. Or maybe figure out some things that you already knew and you just bring it to the forefront of it. Anyway, I'm rambling. So, you know the story. Frogs are cold-blooded and they don't regulate their own temperature. Like us, we regulate our temperature. If we are feeling warm or hot, we can do things in our body to make ourselves feel cold. If we are feeling cold, our body can do things to compensate and feel warm. Frogs do not have that ability. So they depend on the external temperature to regulate their internal temperature. If you put a frog in hot water, it will just jump out. But if you put a frog in cold water and you slowly raise the temperature on them, they would remain in it until they boil themselves to death. It's sort of based on the idea that frogs are cold-blooded, they're amphibians. So if you put the frog in cold water and you slowly raise it, he would regulate his internal temperature to match the external temperature and just continue going like that. The frog in a kettle tells a good moral first. It tells a good story, a story that you could relate to. And because of that, it's been used as a myth many times. And they say it's a myth. But yes, many people have tried to boil frogs. But what most people notice is that the frogs just jump out, because frogs aren't as dumb as we thought. And if you notice, frogs are good at jumping. So they just jump out as the water got hotter. They do not want to be boiled alive. A guy, a German, he was attempting to find out the nature of souls. I don't understand exactly how the experiment went, but there were frogs involved, and he decided to remove the frog's brains to see how this experiment would go. I do not know the connection, maybe you could find out. With their brains inside, he noted that they would jump out of the water when it reaches about 25 degrees. But once you remove their brains, they stayed in the water until they raised their internal temperatures and killed themselves. But I mean, most people will be thinking, obviously they don't have brains. First off, a frog can survive without a brain. Many animals can survive without a brain. You may think some humans can survive without a brain, but we cannot. Those people still have their brains inside. But this tells a deeper story. It's meant to tell a deeper story, that we are not as perceptive of incremental change as we think. There's a concept called creeping normality, where what is normal slowly changes over time, and people don't notice, and they would fight to keep everyone in conformity with the new normal as it goes on. Oh, new normal. People would fight for what they consider normal now, and they would fight for what they consider normal 30 years in the future, and those two things may be totally different. Many people just don't notice things that change slowly over time. How many of the snacks that we eat, and I mean, that's one of the quickest things to recognize, because we eat snacks, let's be real. And snacks that you would have been eating as a little child, and you look at them now, and if you could recall what they were and what they are now, they aren't the same thing. But very often, slow changes are much harder to perceive than you would think, because there are many things that take our attention on a daily basis. We aren't looking for slow changes. We aren't looking to see if cricks change their size by 1 millimeter. Well, at least most of us aren't. And they are. That's why someone who hasn't seen cricks in 30 years come now and see it and like, yes, this changed. While some people, as it crept along, may not have noticed as easily. That's creeping normality. And we are not as perceptive to those changes as you'd think. People are pretty malleable, and We are not as resistant to people influencing us as we'd all like to believe. And it's actually kind of strange. It's probably easier to influence a whole group than a single individual. And that makes it even only more creepy. You think about it, if you go in a crowd and you shout an instruction for the crowd to do, well, I guess according to which position you are in, it may be easier to get the crowd to do. If you shout at one person to do something and they see the entire crowd not doing it, they aren't going to do it. Because of this, if what is considered normal as an entirety around us, we the individual, the crowd being the water in the pot, we the individual being the frog, if the temperature is changing, it's not as easy for us to notice as it's changing. The temperature is changing in the crowd around us, and we are just changing with the crowd temperature as it changes. And what's the problem with that? Being normal is fine, I guess. And there's a concept where the tallest grass gets cut, the nail that is sticking up gets hammered down, and there is some safety to being just part of the group. But if you were part of the group in 1942 in Germany, you would have been part of the group that were killing millions of people. And that was normal. And that didn't become normal one night into one day. It crept into that place. And that's how it works. It happens very slowly, and it can happen very slowly in much shorter of a period of time than you would think. 1 year and what was normal at the start of the year and what is normal now seems way different. Frog in a boiling pot. Many times the group doesn't go well, and if we are not perceptive of the changes within what is considered normal, we would go along with the group as they go to hell, literally even sometimes. What I've found to be one of the most comprehensive ways to notice is red flags. And red flags in the nature of a lifeguard's red flags. The flags that they stick in the sand or stick in the water, marking a certain spot. So regardless if the current pulls you or pushes you in a direction, you could kind of tell where you are based on the flag. And we need to select what our red flags are, put them down, and make sure they don't move. And all we have to do is be honest with ourselves and the interaction with whatever our red flags may be. And it's up to you to assign what you determine your red flag to be, where you determine that's too far for me, or if I see this being called normal, I still wouldn't do it. That's up to you. Make sure they don't move and keep looking at them. In order for that to happen, what we need to do is ensure that our brain is always engaged. And this is where we don't let our brain get removed. And I mean, we cannot live without our brain, so it's not literal, so let's get metaphorical. The frog's brain was removed in order for it to not notice the creeping normality. Our brain being removed is our brain being bypassed, is the part of us that tells us what makes sense and what doesn't being bypassed. And there are many things that do that, and there are many people that are always trying to do it. We can't allow our brain to be disengaged. What disengages our brain? What causes our brain to be removed? And that's where we have to be able to be honest again with ourselves. You have to know exactly, when is my brain most disengaged? Commercials try to do it. That's kind of a bit of marketing. Marketing tries to hit at things that are a little behind what we would determine as our brain. They hit at more core senses. And marketing isn't horrible. It's good for someone to tell you of a certain good that you may want. But it's our job to ensure that our brain remains well intact inside of our skull. No one else has that responsibility over us. It's our job to do it. And as you get older and you have less people looking over you, it becomes even more and more of your responsibility to do it. Because there are always people who are trying to remove that brain. And as they remove it, you would end up as the frog in the kettle, boiling alive. And because of that, I am very skeptical of anyone who is attempting to disengage my brain. And there are people who try to do that. There are people who are using techniques to get past what would have been your logical thinking. And they're trying to get past that so that they can get onto something that doesn't work on that logic anymore. I'm very worried if someone is trying to get beyond my brain. You're trying to remove my brain, and I do not trust you anymore. Emotions disengage our brain sometimes. Emotions hit at a different spot in our brain. It's not about what makes sense, it's about what feels right, or what feels whatever is the way we wish to feel at the moment. But emotions are as much a part of us as our brain is, so be that as it may. You see, even with emotions and our brain being bypassed, if we have our red flags set up right, even with emotions in full swing, we take a glimpse out of the nice illusion of whatever we're living in, whatever emotion it may be, and we take a peek at the red flag and we notice, wait, this flag was over there, now it's over here.